Okay, we should be live.
Good evening. Welcome to the Town of Islip Planning Board meeting for Wednesday, March 2nd, 2022. If you're just joining us and you're here to speak on an application, just ask you to use the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen and let us know which application you're here to speak on. If you're an applicant, we remind you to please keep your presentations to 30 minutes or less. And if you're a member of the community who has signed up to speak on an application, we ask you to keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. Being said, I just wanted to do attendance. Mr. Brown?
Present.
Mr. Bruno? Mr. Bruno? You're just, we can't hear you, Gary. I'm gonna come back to
How's
Mr.
that?
Bruno. Perfect. Yeah,
Here.
Mr. Bruno. Ms. Cruz?
Present.
Mr. Frugiari?
Present.
Mr. Matamore?
Here.
Mr. Moriarty?
Present.
Thank you. Barbara, you can hear everybody? You're good?
Yes, I'm good. Thank you.
Perfect. All right, first item on the agenda, planning board application, public hearing. Serkan Kanbulat, PB 2022-004, north side of Montauk Highway, State Route 27A, approximately 44 feet west of Greenwood Avenue, East Islip, 91 East Main Street. Applicant requests a planning board special permit for a minor restaurant in the Business 1 district pursuant to 68-272.1A. Site plan modifications may also be requested as part of this application. Good evening to the applicant.
Yes, good evening, members of the board, Mr. Chairman. Steve Bertolino for the applicant, 130 West Main Street, East Islip, New York. I presume you can hear me?
Yep.
We can hear you.
Okay, there you go. Yeah, so this is a multi-tenanted property owned by Jim Nazaro over at 91 East Main. With full disclosure, as we begin, I own the property next door at 75 East Main Street. It's showing on your survey as a retail store to the west. Mr. Nazaro and I do have a cross-access agreement in place, which was put there when I developed my property. And I know one of the special permit conditions or the site plan modification conditions require that access agreement to be filed. So full disclosure on both ends. I do not have a financial interest in the particular application, but I do have an interest in the lot next door. That being said, I can tell you that the change here is really de minimis as to what's been happening for the last 30 years. As I said, multi-tenanted, we have the Cactus Salon, we have a pizza place, we have a pork store, Chinese store, an Allstate. And what's happening is a new tenant is coming in to offer a Middle Eastern cuisine takeout location, replacing what used to be a seafood market takeout location. For some reason, the designation is different for the seafood market, which was not a minor restaurant, to the cuisine. So that being said, it triggers a change from 150 to 1, or 1 to 150 to 1 per 100 on the square foot parking requirements. So with the preface of my owning the property next door, the experience, I can tell you this parking lot does not fill up. We have a shortage of lots going from 90 spaces to 77. Every once in a while in years past on a Saturday, if the Cactus Salon had a lot of patrons, you might have some parking issues. That hasn't happened in probably 5 years or so, and it's really a non-issue. I don't think that we're changing anything on the site other than the interior alterations and the technical use of the tenant. If the board has any questions, we're certainly here to answer them, but I'm keeping it short and sweet because I just don't think that it requires anything else.
Thank you. I do not show anyone who's signed up to speak on this application. Did anybody join us late who wishes to be heard? If so, please use the raise your hand feature or *9 if you're on the phone. Not seeing anyone, I'm going to go to Ms. Wozniak for a report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The property is located on the north side of Montauk Highway, approximately 44 feet west of Greenwood Avenue in East Islip. It's improved with an 11,000 square foot multi-tenant commercial building originally CO'd in 1986, with a mix of uses including offices, restaurants, retail, and personal service establishments. Tonight, the applicant is looking to convert an existing 893 square foot retail space into a takeout restaurant with no seats. There are no proposed changes to the site or the facade, only interior work and signage. The site is in general good condition and only a minor 14% parking relaxation is required. So based on this, planning recommends the board grant the application subject to the attached conditions.
Thank you. And the conditions have been signed, or if not, Mr. Bertolino, is your client okay with them?
Yes, we just reviewed them previously this afternoon, and if they have not been signed, they will be signed and submitted.
Thank you. Are there any further questions from the board? Any further from the applicant? Is there a
No,
motion?
nothing. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Is there a motion?
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Moriarty,
I would move to close the hearing and grant the application subject to the CNRs.
it's a motion by Mr. Moriarty to close the public hearing and grant the application subject to the covenants and restrictions. I'll take that as a second, Mr. Bruno.
Yes, it is. Second.
Second by Mr. Bruno. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The application is granted.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
You too. Second item on the agenda, Town Board application, public hearing, Julian Chi Yim, CZ 2021-027, east side of Carlton Avenue, County Route 100, between Ackerman Avenue and Cliff Street, Central Islip, 120 Carlton Avenue. Applicant requests a change of zone from Business 1 District to Business District, and a planning board special permit for a mixed-use building pursuant to 68-257.1G. Site plan modifications are requested as part of this application. Good evening to the applicant. Welcome back, Ms. Whalen. Hopefully we have it all done right this time and we can go forward.
Yes, good evening, Chairman, members of the board and planning staff. My name is Janice Whalen. My office is at 23 Green Street, Huntington, New York. I appear on behalf of Mr. and Mrs. Chi and Julie Yim. We presented previously. Accompanying me on this application is Ms. Julie Yim. I also have Ms. Dana Camardi, who's a law school intern, who's observing our proceedings this evening. I believe that we presented last time, but I'll give a quick overview. We have been working with planning staff since October of 2019 to bring this proposal before you. We propose a mixed-use building, hopefully one of the first in the downtown revitalization of the Central Islip corridor. We've made, actually what we propose on the first floor is 4,500 square feet of a laundromat and 4 retail establishments of 900 square feet each. And then on the second and third floor, we propose 8 apartments. We stand ready to answer any questions that you have, but I think that we pretty much covered all aspects of my presentation last time. We do require certain relaxations, but those relaxations are to maximize the parking. We could comply with landscaping, but that would be at the cost of additional parking. As I recall, we only require a little bit over a 20% parking relaxation. And just so you know that we've met with members of the community, the Central Islip Civic Association. I hope that we've made them happy, but we wanted to assure them that Ms. Yim is a very experienced shopping center operator. She runs at least 4 close laundromats. Each of them are very secure with cameras, and it's in our interest to create a very safe place for people to bring their laundry, certainly not what the community has seen in the past.
Great. If there's no objection, I will just ask that we make the minutes of your presentation from February 9th as part of the record for your presentation.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Seeing no objection, we'll make that part of the record.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Brown.
Yes, just one point. Ms. Whalen said that there were 8 apartments above.
8 on each floor, 8 on the second floor and 8 on the third floor.
Okay, because the staff annals has said 16. Okay,
16,
thank you for
correct.
clarifying.
Sorry about that.
Thank you.
I
I'm gonna
believe
go-
our
ahead.
architect is on the call, but I don't see him in yet.
Yeah.
Oh, he's there. Oh, good. Hi, Chuck.
Do you want to speak?
Mr.
to any-
Charles Southard prepared all the drawings before you.
Do you want to speak to part of your presentation or for questions later?
For questions.
Okay. If there's nothing further at this time, I will go to the public portion, then the staff report.
Thank you.
I do not see anyone here who was signed up for this application. Did anyone join late who wishes to be heard on this application? Please hit the raise your hand feature at the bottom of the screen, or you can use the *9 if you're on the phone. Not seeing anyone. I'm going to turn to Mr. Colgan to give us a report.
Thank you.
I see an M. Hold on, say M. Layla. Is that person with you, or is that person member?
Not with me.
Okay, so why don't we do M. Layla to see? Did I lose M. Layla?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, go ahead.
Can you see me?
We can't see you, but we can hear you, so you can go ahead.
Oh, like I live right on 320 Cliff Street, right? And this schematic that shows there, right, can be very deceitful. Where they have those ramps, that's a big parking lot right there on this, and that's on the southern side of Clifton Carlton. And then on the north and on the western side, you have a 7-Eleven. That's between Ackerman and Cliff, and that's open 24/7. And you have this parking lot, and then you have on the southwestern side, you have a business that open 24/7 there, and then a cesspool business that have commercial trucks. So what I'm dealing with is 7-Eleven open 24/7, a parking lot, Maloney parking lot, and then you have a 24/7 business on the other side. And now I have a parking lot with this business now on 120 in front of my house. And then you have the 3-story building, right? With about 30 tenants, all coming in front of my house 24/7. What I'm dealing with now is 24/7 and parking lots. No residential people in front of me. I mean, imagine if you live there, see what happens. I went the last time to the town, nobody was there. And then luckily I can get you guys here. I'm very thankful for the opportunity, sir.
Thank you. So you live on Cliff Street, you said, directly behind?
Yeah, I live on Cliff Street, sir.
Okay, and directly behind the proposed development?
No, my neighbor, she don't know how to get on Zoom. Okay. I live across the street on Cliff on the southern side. And the parking lot will be in front of my house.
Got it. Thank you.
All the entrance, and the deception is clearly here. They put the ramps where there is a big parking lot. Maloney Funeral parking lot is right there, sir. And I have to deal with that 24/7. I even got a video here, but I don't know how to play it, to be honest with you. I can try to bring it up.
You could certainly, if you want to send it in to the staff, they can review it.
I don't know if I can get it because I don't see how an advanced button how to play
That's
a video.
Fine. You can't share it on here, but you can certainly send it into the planning staff for them to review.
Yeah, that's when they have a funeral. That's what only one cars can get by. I sent a letter to the town. I went there and I give the planning board a letter already. I don't know if anybody have it, and then I email one too.
Thank you. Thank you for raising the issues for us this evening.
I appreciate that, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Friedland, could I respond very briefly?
If you'd like, go right ahead.
I just want to assure the neighbor that we have nothing but respect for the Central Islip community. The Yim family are longstanding business owners in Central Islip, and they only seek to enhance the community. We will not be open 24 hours. We're open 6 a.m. to 12 midnight for the laundromat. We are going to have security cameras. There'll be security cameras outside. The parking lot will be lit only in our parking lot, and we do propose a 25-foot landscape buffer between the parking lot to mitigate and minimize any adverse impact on neighboring residences.
Thank you, Ms. Whelan. I'm going to go to William Couch, who also wishes to be heard on this.
Hello?
Go ahead.
Yes, I'm the wife of William Couch, and we just spoke to my neighbor. I am on the side of that, wherever you guys want to make the building. It's such a small space, and is it going to be low-income housing? Because this is like a really nice neighborhood, and like my neighbor said, the 7-Eleven is 24 hours a day, and then you're going to have, what, 16 apartments and a laundromat? No one
Correct.
ever came here, and I live at 315 Cliff Street, to speak to us about anything. We just recently got all this information, just recently actually, about what they wanted to do. And no one's ever come and spoken to us about it.
2019, nobody came in.
Yeah, especially in 2019, and I've been here for 19 years, and no one's ever come and spoken to us about it.
Mr. Friedland, may I respond to Mrs. Couch?
Sure, let me just ask if she has anything else first, and then I'll let her
Okay.
respond. Is there anything else?
No,
Ms.
that's
Couch?
good. I just feel like it's not a good idea for the neighborhood. That's it.
Okay, thank you.
don't
Mrs.
like it.
Couch, I
Thank
would
you.
be happy, sorry.
Go ahead.
Go ahead,
I'd be
Ms.
happy to give you my contact information, my phone number, and I'd like to share the plans with you. So you can see it's really going to be a beautiful building, and we don't seek to bring down the neighborhood, but hopefully complement and elevate the neighborhood with a beautiful building that's going to have a lot of beautiful architectural details on it. We certainly don't, we're seeking to attract, a very high-end clientele, both in the businesses and in the apartments.
Thank you, Ms. Whalen. Is there anybody else who wishes to be heard on this application? Not seeing anyone else raise their hand, I'm going to turn to Mr. Colgan to give us a report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. As stated by the applicant, this application proposes a mixed-use building on a vacant site in downtown Central Islip. The bottom floor would consist of 3,600 square feet of retail space, a 4,500 square foot laundromat, and there would be 16 apartments above those commercial uses. The hamlet of Central Islip was recently the recipient of a $10 million grant from New York State as part of the state's downtown revitalization initiative. The vision for the stretch of Carlton Avenue is for a vibrant, pedestrian-oriented corridor consisting of mixed-use buildings, restaurants, and other entertainment venues commonly associated with modern downtown areas. The business district is the zoning district employed by the town to foster these types of uses and appropriate downtown architecture and design. The site plan as drafted shows a conforming 25-foot residential buffer to the east, an approximately 20% parking relaxation, and an approximate 50% landscaping relaxation. The parking relaxation is in keeping with many mixed-use developments where the peak parking demand of the various uses tend to not conflict with each other. The landscaping relaxation is generally consistent with downtown environments, given that higher floor area ratios, meaning bigger buildings, are permitted. Parking is very important for those buildings, and good architecture is expected to mitigate any aesthetic impacts. This is the first application of its kind to have a public hearing since the state awarded the $10 million grant. This and other subsequent applications will be required to be sewered, which the town is working on with Suffolk County and New York State. The staff recommends that the board reserve decision tonight to review the comments heard by the public before bring this back for a recommendation.
Thank you, Ms. Colgan. Questions from the board?
Yes.
Mr. Bruno. Mr. Bruno, then Mr. Frugieri, and then Ms. Cruz.
Mr. Southern, can you show us, I'm looking at a set of elevations at this point. Can we see the latest ones? Has there been any revision to the ones?
There's a rendering you have on file.
Yes.
The project has it. You should be able to see it, and that is the latest. That's the elevations. They are the latest.
Okay.
And
I'm looking at the color version, the one that's
correct. That's the rendering.
that it's not the, is that it's brick. The architecture is kind of strange to me. Okay. It doesn't seem to know where it's going, in the sense that it doesn't feel like downtown. And I'll give you some of the things that I just find a little troubling. I understand why the stair towers, for example, are at each end, but those are facing streets. They have no level of articulation on them. More disturbing to me is the way the upper two floors seem to have no relation to the lower floor. And what's interesting is the upper two floors seem to be trying to go in a vertical direction by popping out those pieces, which is very nice. You have the columns underneath, but the columns have virtually no relation to the floor plan underneath, which shows up very much in the, if you look at the floor plan, it's obvious that the columns, that the second floor and the first floor are not at all in any kind of agreement or alignment. That it's interesting, like I said, because you seem to have the vertical elements, and yet you've got this other horizontal piece that cuts it. It's almost like they were two different buildings put on top of each other, setting the tone for the downtown of Central Islip. I personally, I mean, I could go into things like the coins are on the outsides of some spots, then they're on the inside, but they're not on the outside of the other parts. I'm saying that I think you've got a lot of decent pieces in there. I'm not sure they're put together well, and I don't see the level of sensitivity I'd like to see to the downtown.
If I could just speak to that for just a second, we had gone back and forth with the planning staff and the former commissioner. If there are any amendments you'd like to see, we are more than happy to make them. If you'd like, we can, in very short order, submit revisions based on your comments, Mr. Bruno.
Yeah, again, Mr. Southard is the architect on this, and I'm sure he understands what I've said. I'm sure he'll just take them under advisement and
Mr. Bruno, you're freezing on us, Mr. Bruno.
And do what he. So I leave it to Mr. Southard to take my comments and do what he thinks is appropriate with them.
Ms. Whalen,
Mr. Bruno, this was submitted to planning staff numerous times. This is what was developed by planning staff and the former commissioner. This is what they wanted to see. Not my thoughts, but this is what they wanted to see.
Okay,
That's
I'd like to see you. I'd like to see your thoughts, Mr. Southard.
I've got a bunch of them. I've submitted it 5 times to them.
okay, before I do hear from Ms. Whalen that the applicant is willing to take this into consideration and
Absolutely.
Thank you. Mr. Bruno, anything further from you?
No, sir.
Ms. Jerry.
Before I start, I just want to echo Mr. Bruno's comments. I think I raised them at the initial public hearing. And in layman's terms, I don't feel that the architectural styling here is suitable for a downtown district, and especially since it's the first one that's going to be coming in to Central Islip. This is Central Islip's Main Street, and I think we have to have a building and an architectural styling that reflects that. I believe my comments at the last hearing was that this has more of an institutional type look than a downtown feel to it. So I echo Mr. Bruno's sentiments as far as the architectural styling. My question, though, is for Sean. Sean, the community raised issues about the development of this site. What would be permitted in a Business 1 district?
So in a Business 1 district, laundromats are permitted, bars, taverns, and nightclubs are permitted. Generally speaking, you would see retail and office uses. Basically, the fundamental difference with the business district is it offers more flexible design in terms of you can offer a bigger building, you can offer mixed uses, which provides the apartments that provide the foot traffic we normally like to see in downtowns that, make them thrive economically. And, you can move the building closer to the street. So those are a few of the key differences, but more or less the number of uses are generally the same. It's just the mixed use component is a fundamental difference as far as uses are concerned.
Okay, so many of the uses that are being proposed are allowed as of right now. It's just putting together the mixed use, putting it closer to the curb line, creating more of a downtown Main Street type feel.
That's correct.
Okay. All right, that answers my questions.
Thank you, Mr. Ruggieri.
Mr.
Cruz?
Chairman?
Oh, I'm going to go to Ms. Cruz, then Mr. Brown.
Just more of my input as to knowing that this is going to be, we're trying to revitalize downtown Central Islip, and this would be a great first impression of what would be a great downtown for Central Islip. But my comment is more of if there was any other options besides the laundromat, because when I envisioned, or when you hear about revitalizing downtown for entertainment and restaurants, kind of like puts a damper when you see a laundromat, where you could probably, though, if you're going to build all those apartments, you would want them to have restaurants, things to eat, entertainment, more things to bring to the neighborhood and have them come down and walk and be a nicer thing than just a laundromat. Because I'm assuming, what other types of businesses will you be putting down there if you're going to put a laundromat?
There's going to be food uses, retail uses. I mean, we definitely want to add to the downtown feel, but Julie and her family are very experienced shopping center owners, and they see a need for a nice laundromat in this neighborhood. And I could show you pictures of their other spaces, and it's not your typical laundromat. They're really state of the art. They're beautiful. They're clean. They're safe.
No, I understand. I get that. I'm not saying that it wouldn't be in a new building. It's just that, when you're thinking of revitalizing, and I'm really kind of thinking of how Bayshore was revitalized as a downtown, and you can walk down there. There's so much to see and do. And I just don't see a laundromat in there. It just was one of my things that caught my attention. But again, this is a use that she could do. I just wanted to make a comment that I would since this is the first one that's going to be put in Central Islip as a new development, I would have liked to have seen something, besides a laundromat.
Well, we
and some landscaping in the front, because I know if you're going to be walking and, but I understand that would have to be worked into the plans, right? Some landscaping in the front to make it look nice. And it just looks so bare. It just looks like a brand new building. And I don't know. I just I was looking for something more, so for it being the first one to revitalize downtown Central Islip.
As far as the landscaping in the front of the building, staff made us remove it. They made us move the building back further from Carlton Avenue. And they made us make it like a plaza. They wanted a plaza there. They didn't want landscaping. That's why we're so short. The deficit of the landscaping on the site and on the front yard. This is the request of staff.
Right. Okay.
And certainly, Ms. Cruz, we've got 3,600 other square feet on the bottom that we could put, more exciting uses than the laundromat. But the Yim family did feel that there was a need for this, and certainly, but it's not going to be the only use on the first floor.
Okay, just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I would also echo, I'm not a fan of laundromats in certain areas. I would echo Ms. Cruz's comments on that. But in terms of landscaping as well, I think there's the ability, from what I heard from Ms. Whalen, to go back and at least work with planning staff in terms of the architecture and what this may or may not look like in the future. I just wanted to ask, there's one question that was asked to me from Ms. Whalen or Mr. Colgan, and then I'll go to Mr. Brown. The affordability composition of the unit itself, a certain percentage of them set aside as affordable, or are there none set aside? What is the?
Whatever the town is requiring. Charles, do you have something to say to that?
Well, there is no requirement for affordable. We're not asking for anything. It would be market value apartment rental units. It would be, they're small units, they're 2-bedroom units.
950 square feet.
Yeah, and so they will be lower in price. They'll be affordable for working families.
All units are at market, is what you're saying?
That's correct.
Thank you. Mr. Brown?
Yes. Sean, could you put the elevation you had up with the brick building? No, the color version we had up. Thank you, Sean. And my question, first of all, with the comments in reference to the landscaping, on a plaza walk like this, they could do planters along, which would add to, some vegetation to it, which would look nice. My concern is, what do we do with signage? Is there separate rules and regulations now for the downtown district? And what would we do with signage on the bottom here as far as the businesses?
We haven't gotten that far in the design, but I'm certain any signage would be subject to the approval of the planning staff. It looks to me like there's not a lot of room for building face sign. It might be more the window signs.
Now, if you look at the elevations, I believe show signage on the band above the windows and the doors.
Got it. Actually, I'm looking at one of the elevations that were provided, and it looks as if on that along the right above the poles, that there are areas for signage, retail, and laundromat. You could see it in the middle elevation.
Yep, you can see it along there.
Because I think it's gonna, if it was, some of the nicer wood signs or the ones that have the iron with them, it would just be a nicer look. And I think we're not trying to be picky, but this is our first one going into this district, and we really want to make sure we get it right.
Before we submit again, we'll have some samples for you to take a look at, some renderings of signage, and add planters to this to soften up the streetscape.
Anything further, Mr. Brown?
Nope, that's it.
Thank you. So again, just another thing, I'll agree with my Vice Chair, Mr. Brown, on the signage too, to make sure it's we're not driving into a strip mall shopping center. We're getting some nice signs that reflect a nice downtown community, nice downtown feel. Further questions
I
from?
want to see the uniform vinyl signs across the strip.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you, Mr. Brown. What did you say?
I don't want to see like all the same color, just vinyl signs just fitting into the strip above the doors up there, all the way across the whole shopping center, all color coordinated. I would just like to see something that, gives a little bit of individual look.
I think, Ms. Whalen, if anything, take note of the board's desire to make sure that when this comes back before us, that it looks fitting for the first building in the new downtown district. So
Absolutely, and we're honored to be the first building and want to meet with your approval.
thank you. Are there further questions from the board?
Yes, I just
For Jerry?
Yeah, it's not so much a question, but a comment. When we do get to the point where we're putting covenants and restrictions and conditions together, I like to see a condition, learning from our past experiences with downtown areas. I like to see a condition that regarding the residential uses, the apartments, that they be conditioned on signed leases, and they're not something that's just rented out, week by week.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
I'm sure that would be also in the interest of the property owner as well.
Yeah.
Thank you. Are there further questions from the board?
Mr. Chair, if I could.
Yes, Mr. Moriarty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just another point I'd raise, and it's picking up on the comment from the neighbors to the east. There's going to be a significant number of parking spaces facing into a residential area going forward. That obviously the parking is now on the eastern side, which makes sense because you want the building on the western side, but that means a lot of those spots are going to be facing into residential homes. So I know there's a 20-foot, 5-foot buffer back there. I'd like to make sure it's not just a grass buffer, but a buffer that's going to take away some of that reflections from cars starting and being moved. You've got an operation, a laundromat that's going to be operating through midnight. So I think it's a little unfair to the neighbors to not make sure there's a significant buffer back there, ensuring that you don't have lights shining into their property.
I think that's very important. And would 5 or 6 feet of landscaping do it, 5 or 6 feet of height?
Yeah, I just want to make sure it's not just open space. I want to see some height. I'll defer to you guys as to how to best do that, but I want to make sure to meet that concern the neighbors are raising. And I think it's a very valid one. They don't have a parking lot now. They'll have a parking lot aiming into their neighborhood, and it's going to be a lot of light, a lot of headlights potentially in the evenings shining into onto their property. So
I think that's a very valid concern and something that we'll integrate into the plans with more dense and high landscaping.
Exactly. Perfect. All right. Thank you.
Just so you understand, there is a specific buffer required by the town of Islip. It's 3 rows of planting of evergreens, and it's already determined to be there. So it's a requirement of the 25-foot buffer zone.
Yeah, I didn't see it on the rendering that was shown. I had hoped it would be. If it's there, that's great. But I hadn't seen it in at least the piece that I've been looking at. But
there will be a full landscape drawing to go with this.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Just in terms of logistics, should we just submit our revised renderings to the to planning staff?
Yeah, I'd ask you to submit it to Mr. Colgan and planning staff, and they'll communicate with us, and we'll provide any comments back.
Perfect.
And the other question I know Mr. Layla raised, and Mr. Colgan as well, and I'm not sure who can better answer this, but I don't know if there's anything that can be done in terms of the shifting of, I guess it was the entrance exit that sort of conflicts or adds to where the funeral home is. I don't know what, if anything, can be done there, but I think that's something we should take a look at.
We will.
There are further questions from the board? Would the applicant like to add anything further?
No, we'll, if we could keep the record open, and we'll promptly work together and resubmit. And I guess when we're ready, hopefully very soon, we will be back before you with a plan that meets with your approval.
Great, so thank you for that. And then if anyone has any further comments or questions, the record will be open. Just please feel free to submit those in writing or by email, and or drop them off at town hall, and they will be shared with the members of the board.
I see that there's five comments here. Will we be going through them, or are we waiting on those?
I'm not sure which comment. Where are you talking about?
It looks like there's 5 chats on the bottom.
No, I mean, basically it'll run the same way as a public hearing. Everybody gets their 3 minutes to speak, and then we take those questions, which I've raised on behalf of Mr. Layler in terms of the parking lot entrance, the affordability question. The laundromat was raised by somebody else before I did, but those are the way we normally run the meetings.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. If there's nothing further from the applicant, I'd ask for a motion.
Chairman?
Mr. Frugieri.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that we close this public hearing and keep the written comment period open for 30 days and reserve decision tonight.
Thank you. There's a motion by Mr. Frugieri to close the public hearing, leave the written comment period open for 30 days, and reserve decision this evening.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but aren't we keeping it open so we could resubmit?
Well, no, you can resubmit all. The public hearing is what we're closing.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
And this is a substantial change to the project itself. So we no need to keep the public hearing open. Is there a second to that? Mr. Brown?
I'll second the motion.
Second by Mr. Brown. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions? The item is reserved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 3 on the agenda, Town Board application public hearing has been adjourned. That was Sunrise Development. Item 4, Town Board application public hearing, LRHC Bayshore, New York, LLC, care of Roberts Equities, Gray Bar at Grand Central, CZ 2022-003, south side of Sunrise Highway Service Road, State Route 27, approximately 580 feet east of Brentwood Road, Bayshore, 1850 Sunrise Highway. Applicant requests a modification of covenants and restrictions associated with TC 4762 to allow a change of use from a health club to a medical office on the 2nd floor. A parking relaxation may be required as part of this application. Good evening to the applicant.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Anthony Guardino, law firm of Farrell Fritz, for the applicant, LRHC Bayshore. I also have with me on the line Chris Jackalone from LRHC. The applicant, this application relates to a 2-acre parcel of property that's located at 1850 Sunrise Highway in Bayshore. It's currently improved with a 2-story, 20,000 square foot building. The site is located in the town's B3 district. The first floor of the building is currently occupied by a physical therapy facility and City MD Urgent Care Center. The second floor had been used as a Lucille Roberts Health Club, but is now currently vacant. My client is seeking a favorable recommendation from the planning board for modification of a restrictive covenant that was imposed by the town board in 2007. And that covenant restricts the use of the second floor of the building to a health club only. My client is currently entered into a lease with Catholic Health Services, which would occupy the entire second floor and use the space for medical offices, and therefore we need relief from this covenant. I would point out that the existing physical therapy facility, the urgent care, and the proposed Catholic Health Services office, medical office uses are all permitted in the town's B3 zoning district. Catholic Health Services occupancy of the second floor does not require any modifications of the existing site plan, which is already fully compliant with each and every requirement of the B3 district. There's more than enough parking. 132 spaces are required. We're providing what the site provides, 140 spaces. All dimensional requirements are complied with. In fact, even landscaping, overall landscaping and landscaping in the front yard, which is very unusual for applicants to be able to satisfy that. We actually satisfy that as well. So we don't need any site plan relaxations. There are no neighbors or residential neighbors here. We have Sunrise Highway on the north. We've got 10 lanes of Sunrise Highway between the road and the main highway and the service roads. To the north, further north, you have Big Lots, which is about 500 feet away from this site. To the south, you have cemetery. St. Patrick's Cemetery is located to the south. To the west, you have the bowling alley, former bowling alley site. And my understanding was that there was a change of zone application that was granted not that long ago to change the zone from recreational service G to allow the site to be used for the sale of new automobiles. And then to the east, you have actually I-2 property. And the site immediately to the east is actually used to store new cars, doing used cars on it.
I just want to interrupt you, Mr. Yes. 1 second. Barbara, can you hear him clearly?
Sorry, he started cutting out at the end. So
yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
How far back do I need to go? Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you now.
Okay, so I was just saying the neighbors, you have a cemetery to the south, you have the highway to the north, you have the bowling alley to the west, which is vacant and was the subject of a change of zone application for a used car lot. To the east, you have I-2 property, and the property immediately to the east is actually is being used to store new and used vehicles.
Mr. William, if you could just speak a little loud. I know you're cutting in and out a little bit. I want to make sure Barbara gets the record.
I apologize. Is that better? I'll just look into the computer if that's okay. That's where my microphone is.
If you can just get a little closer to the mic, that would be great.
I'm actually right on it. So,
that's better.
Okay, let me just see. Yeah, I'm right on it. There are no residential uses in the area, absolutely none. So no residences will be impacted by this development. And then lastly, I would just point out that we understand from the planning department that it has requested that the neighbor to the west execute a restrictive covenant in connection with its change of zone application to provide for cross-access, reciprocal cross-access between the two properties. But to date, my understanding is no covenant has been executed. And in fact, after speaking with the applicants, the neighboring property applicant's attorney, it's not even clear whether this is actually moving forward or not. It's just uncertain. Nevertheless, my client is prepared to execute a similar covenant to what was requested of the neighboring property owner. That way, cross-access will be addressed at some point in the future once both covenants are in place. And at that time, when the curb cuts are amended or revised or relocated, at that time, site plan approval would be required, I guess, for both parcels, and we would address it at that time. But until that time, my client's really just looking to put medical office on the second floor and make no site plan changes at all. And we would hope that we would be able to just proceed to a building permit for those interior alterations. Again, this is a permitted use, and the site is fully compliant with all of the requirements of the code. I don't have anything further. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Guardino.
Thank you.
I do not see anyone signed up to speak on this. Is there anyone who joined the room who wishes to be heard? Not seeing anyone. I'm going to turn to Mr. Colgan to give us a report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As stated by the applicant, this application proposes a medical office use in an existing gym space within a multi-use building. Prior to this, the property has been the subject of a change of zone from Recreation Service G District to Business 3 District back in 2007. The reason for the current covenant limiting it to a gym space was to preserve some sort of recreational component for the community to compensate for the loss of the roller rink that previously occupied the property. Generally, the staff does prefer to preserve recreation space, but it has been noted that recreational services have suffered since the beginning of the pandemic, and that reasoning did serve as justification for the rezoning of the bowling alley to the west for a non-recreational use. The site plan does show that the site would comply with its parking requirements for the additional medical space. The applicant correctly stated that staff's primary concern is the traffic safety with regards to the side entrances between the bowling alley, which soon to be an approved motor vehicle dealership should that move forward, and the subject site, as the entrances between the two sites are very close together. During the review of the vehicle dealership, the town's traffic consultant noted ideally this site would share a single access point to the Sunrise South Service Road with the Lucille Roberts facility immediately adjacent to the east. A covenant was imposed on the vehicle dealership property requiring an offer of cross access, and the staff recommends the same for the subject application. And the staff has no objection to that being formally executed if and when the property to the west formally files their site plan application, which may be a while, but we think this application could move forward without having the cross access in place right this second. So with that, this staff is here if you have any questions.
Mr. Guardino, your agreement, obviously, I think I heard you say the cross access was not an issue. You're muted, but I'm going to take that as you're saying yes, even though you're shaking your head side to side.
Sorry. Yes, the devil's always in the details. We need to make sure that we can come to an agreement. Ideally, my client would like to have a shared access point with a single curb cut for both parcels, but I'm sure we can work it out with the neighbor.
Are there any further questions from the board?
Is there a recommendation from the staff on this?
Yeah. Mr. Colgan, do you want to go forward with subject to the terms and covenants and restrictions being worked out by you, or do you need?
We could work it out subject to staff working out with the applicant, and worst case scenario, if we can't agree, we could bring this back to the March 23rd planning board hearing.
That's okay with me, Mr. Guardino. Is that good for you?
Yeah, that's terrific. Thank you.
Perfect. Mr. Brown, go ahead. Since you started the questions, you get the motion.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to close the hearing and grant the application, subject to the covenants and restrictions being worked out with the planning staff and the applicant.
Motion by Mr. Brown to close the public hearing and grant the application, subject to the CNRs being worked out between the planning staff and the applicant. Is there a second to that motion? Second by Mr. Matamore. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Abstentions? The application is granted. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Good to see you all. See you
Good
soon.
evening.
Yeah, good evening.
Town Board application, public hearing, JJ Capital Enterprises LLC, CZ 2022-005, southwest side of Garfield Avenue and South First Street, Bay Shore, 26-28 Garfield Avenue. Applicant requests a change of zone from Industrial 1 to Industrial 2 for the outside storage of vehicles, construction equipment, and materials. Site plan modifications may also be requested as part of this application. Good evening to the applicant. Do we have the applicant? Mr. Clemens, are you?
Yeah.
There we go. Yep, I can hear you now.
Good evening to the board. My name is Joseph Clemens, a partner within the firm German and Clemens Architecture PC, located at 3275 Veterans Memorial Highway, Suite B11, Ronkonkoma, New York, 11779. I'm speaking to you this evening in regards to the 5.808 acre parcel situated on the south side of South First Street and which is a through lot, which also has frontage on both Garfield Avenue and Cleveland Avenue, with a property address of 26-28 Garfield Avenue, Bayshore, New York, 11706. Property tax map number 0500-179-04-119.001. The subject property is currently owned and had been previously improved by Garfield Properties, Inc. However, I'm here this evening representing the contract vendee, JJ Capital Enterprises, LLC, and their request for a proposed change of zone from Industrial 1 to Industrial 2 to legally permit for the outdoor storage of vehicles, construction equipment, and materials. The subject parcel is currently improved with two separate buildings, one multi-tenant industrial building of approximately 10,000 square feet, which is 28 Garfield, which is recognized via the certificate of occupancy, and another 8,200 square foot industrial building, 26 Garfield, which had obtained building permits in 2006, but did not appear to have been finalized. It is the intent of our office to perform a certificate of compliance application to legalize the existing building, which had appeared to have been erected sometime between 2007 and 2010. These existing one-story masonry structures are to remain unaltered, as the purpose of this application more so revolves around that of the site and the area in which this change of zone is requested. Per conversations held with the planning department staff, it is my understanding that the commercial properties within this area of Islip, although for the most part are zoned Industrial 1, are predominantly used as if they were Industrial 2. Reviewing the town of Islip zoning map, there are indeed a few properties within close proximity that are spot zoned Industrial 2 as well, one of which just around the corner. After reviewing satellite imagery and personally inspecting the area, I can confirm that the vast majority of properties within this area have outdoor storage and other characteristics consistent with that of an Industrial 2 zoning criteria. As such, we respectfully request to be formally recognized as such. The site complies with the town of Islip zoning code in regard to the percentage of lot occupancy, area density, and width. The outdoor storage proposed as indicated on the provided plan also complies with the zoning criteria, as none of the uses indicated are prohibited per section 68-355. These would include the storage of construction equipment and materials, fencing material or PVC, as well as automobile, truck, and bus parking. In regard to the car parking, per town of Islip subdivision land development regulations, it would appear that there is an adequate number of parking provided per the requirements for industrial buildings, being that the parking required for both existing buildings would be approximately 30 spaces, while 42 car spaces are presently provided on site. After performing a visual inspection of the site, I do not believe that the heights of any of the commodities stored exceed 18 feet allowable, exceed the 18-foot allowable height provision for that of accessory structures. Rather, the tallest item which I had encountered was 16 foot in height. The outdoor storage, as seen on plan, is presently separated by means of concrete block walls, which also creates some unique topography throughout the site. Some of the outdoor storage areas actually occur below the street level, making them less of a visual disturbance. For feedback received, however, our office has had conversations with Mr. Sean Colgan of the Planning Department, as well to discuss the implementation of additional landscaping and other potential measures to screen the outdoor storage from street view, thus making the property more aesthetically pleasing. This would include street trees along street frontage areas at approximately 30 to 35 feet on center and setback sufficiently from any potential overhead wires, as well as possibly adding screen plantings along the front yard fence lines. These items are not presented on the plan set before you, but will be reviewed and analyzed further with the planning staff. It should also be noted that a landscaping relaxation would be requested as part of this application, as well as only approximately 4.5% of the subject property is landscaped. In comparison to the surrounding properties, this is within the same nature and character of the area. Other items which may need to be addressed and modified are the fence and gate locations, however, are also currently consistent with that of the adjacent and surrounding properties. For the documentation which had been provided to the planning department in preparation for this hearing, you can see that the existing site is fairly clean and well maintained, taking into consideration the surrounding area. The intent of my client was to maintain as much of the site in its present state, however, are of the understanding that some improvements may be necessary per their request for the change of zone from Industrial 1 to Industrial 2. My client simply wished to establish and maintain a property which conforms to the town of Islip requirements while providing something which contextually fits in with the surrounding area. Again, the subject site is already an improvement from some of the other local properties, and with any additional improvements provided will become a further benefit to the community and enhance the overall aesthetic. As such, we would respectfully request that you recommend this change of zone so my clients can occupy the site as intended and can continue to be a pleasant neighbor while also enhancing the Bay Shore community. I thank you for your time and consideration as always. And of course, if you have any questions, I would be more than happy to answer.
Thank you. We go to the public hearing. Is there anybody who wishes to be heard on this application? If you want to hit the raise your hand feature. I have a Richard, is it Parziali? Sure. Go ahead and speak if you like. Parziali, if I'm saying that correct. Okay, so and I have a Ann O'Neill. Why don't we go to Ann O'Neill? Ms. O'Neill, can you unmute?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. I own 31 Cleveland, and I only found out about this meeting about 4 o'clock this afternoon, and I'm not on Long Island. Is this directly to the south of my of 31 Cleveland?
Mr. Colgan, do you know?
I'm gonna pull up the aerial now.
Or Mr. Clemens, if you happen to know, but we'll pull the aerial up, obviously.
Okay, so there's a building in between the space with the cars. So you're directly behind me from what it appears. My only concern would be the buildings on the corner of Pioneer are in such bad, not repaired, but they're just in terrible condition, and they just make the area look so terrible that I really wouldn't want anything like that to occur that close to me.
Okay, thank you for that. Are you saying that the buildings on this property are in disrepair?
No, I'm saying that the buildings to the north of my building, there's just, I am the new person on the block, so I don't want to throw any stones. But I just would hope that, like you're speaking of landscaping and keeping everything pristine and landscaped around would be exactly what would happen.
Yep, that would be some of the conditions that you heard the applicant already mentioned. I'm sure you'll hear more about it from the staff. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to try Richard, is it Parziali, one more time? Okay, that's not going through. Anybody else wish to be heard on this application? Okay. Not seeing anyone, I'm going to turn to Mr. Colgan for a report. Mr. Parziali, if you happen to get your microphone to work right after Mr. Colgan's report, we'll let you speak. Mr. Colgan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This application proposes various types of outdoor storage on an existing industrial lot. Prior to this, the property has been the subject of a transfer station proposal back in 2009. The property has been used for outside storage for many years, according to aerial and street view photographs. The Industrial 2 district is generally preferred in areas buffered by other Industrial 1 properties and away from main thoroughfares. The surrounding area of this neighborhood consists of Industrial 1 and 2 uses, so it does appear that the nature of this use appears appropriate. The conceptual site plan shows 4.5% overall landscaping and parking for 42 vehicles. The staff would prefer to see more front yard landscaping with a sufficient depth to support street trees. But based on that, we did receive other correspondence from other applicants, other neighboring properties. The email that the staff and the board may want to go over. So the staff's not prepared to make a recommendation tonight, but we could foreseeably bring this back to March 23rd once we've worked out any other issues or comments that we've heard tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Colgan. Mr. Clemens, obviously you've heard from Mr. Colgan about the sufficient depth in the front to support those trees that you spoke about. So that's something we're going to be looking to see if you so choose to come back before us. Okay, are there further questions from the board?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Moriarty, and then
Yeah.
Mr. Frugieri.
Yes, I recall seeing an email, I think, or a letter from an adjoining property owner that indicated that apparently land or fill had been removed from this site and it's now causing flooding on his property. Mr. Clemens, could you speak on that? And what sort of remediation is going to be contemplated by the application or the applicant?
I haven't received any of the emails. I don't know who or what properties are stating as such. Once I have that documentation, I can look into it a little bit further and see. I did frequent the site. I was actually there yesterday taking pictures and kind of just familiarizing myself a little bit more with the topography because it is fairly unique in regards to the way it presently is. So I'm not sure if it's the properties, I guess, to the south. There is a steep decline. I don't know if that was something which the current owner had created or not. I'd have to look into that a little bit further. But realistically, the way the subdivision and land development regulations read, all surface water is supposed to remain on site. So that would be something that would have to be looked into to see exactly what can be done to remedy it.
Yep, understood. Yeah, if you could keep an eye on that piece, and when you come back, I think I'd just like to get some comfort that that's been addressed.
Understood.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Frugieri.
Yeah, I'd like to know exactly what is being stored on this property at this time. I see on the aerial a lot of vehicles.
Yeah.
What's the state of those vehicles?
It's probably, I'd say, similar in nature to a certain degree. If you look on the preliminary site plan that was proposed, the actual uses are called out. There is a few different areas that contain construction equipment, whether it be some trucks or actual materials. Trucking was one. Fencing materials, PVC, that was a large area. That was one of the sunken in areas that you visibly do not see so much of from the street view. I could show aerials as well, which I'm sure if you frequent the site, you
I'm
saw.
looking at it. I'm looking at an area right now. I'm just trying to get a sense of exactly what type of material is being stored there right now. And
Yep.
if we did codify an L2 district, my concern is one of an environmental one. If disabled vehicles were to be stored here in mass, there should be a covenant on there that the oils and everything are drained from the vehicle prior to being brought to the site. Or if there's some type of filtration that's put into the drainage system. It looks like this is just a plain dirt parking area, that there's no actual formal drainage system per se.
At this time, as far as I'm aware, I'm not sure if that satellite imagery that you have is current or not. I don't believe there was any disabled vehicles presently on the site. So I don't know if that would still be a potential concern, at least for what's there now.
It would be, because I think the more intense industrial zone would permit that. And we have to have safeguards in there. Right now, we don't have any conditions before us.
Yeah, understood. I don't believe the clients would have any issues putting some form of language in the covenants restrictions to prevent that from occurring.
Okay.
Thank you. Any further questions from the board? Is Mr. DiLeonardo part of the application?
He's part of the group which I'm representing. If he'd like to say something, he's more than welcome to, but he's part of the JJ Capital Enterprises team.
Your presentation, so you tell me.
If he hasn't spoken, I'm sure it's fine as it is.
Okay. Anything further from the board? Anything further from the applicant?
No, sir.
Is there a motion?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Moriarty.
Yeah, I'd make a motion to close the public hearing and reserve decision this evening.
Motion by Mr. Moriarty to close the public hearing and reserve decision. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Matamore. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? We're reserved. Thank you.
Have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you again.
Item 6 on the agenda, site plan modification decision. Jim Nazaro, SP 2021-004, southwest intersection of Montauk Highway, State Route 27A and Degnan Boulevard, number 500 Degnan Boulevard, Bay Shore. Applicant requests a parking dimension relaxations, drainage relaxations, and to maintain 2 curb cuts instead of 1 in connection with the construction of a 2-story medical office. Good evening to the applicant.
Chairman, this is James Nazaro. My engineer should be online. I'm not sure why I don't.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, there
Yes,
you go.
hi. Sorry about that. Had a little difficulty there. Couldn't hear anything else. Okay, my name is Brian Riley. I'm a design engineer with Stonefield Engineering and Design, located at 584 Broadway, Suite 310, New York, New York. I'm here on behalf of the applicant for this project, which is located at the southwest corner of Montauk Highway and Degnan Boulevard in Bay Shore, New York. To keep it straight and to the point here, this application was previously before this board back in July of 2020. Since that time, there's been a pretty extensive back and forth with the town engineering division regarding some of the engineering design on this property, specifically related to drainage. As a result of all of that back and forth, we are back in front of this board now to modify some of the original relaxations that were granted for this property. To run through those very quickly, the first one I would start with is the landscape buffer. There are 2 areas of landscape buffer, one at the southeast corner of the property and one at the southwest corner of the property. The original relaxation down in the southeast corner was for 10.1 feet from the property line. This has reduced down to 9.4 feet from the property line as a result of some of the engineering changes further north in the site. On the southwest corner, we were originally providing a 6-foot landscape buffer. Right there, you can see at that very small pinch point. That has reduced down to 4.6 feet of landscape buffer. That is a result of a meets and bounds correction in the past year and a half. There was a survey error from the original presentation to the planning board. Secondly, the second relaxation is a relaxation for head-to-head parking stalls, which you can see in the middle of the parking lot there. Town of Islip requirements are for head-to-head parking stalls to be 20 feet in length. We are providing 19 feet in length for all head-to-head arrangements. We're keeping this as 19 feet length for 2 reasons. One, if we were to make them 20 feet in length, those previously mentioned landscape buffers would be severely reduced, which is a little bit of a balance that we were working with. Secondly, from an industry standard standpoint, 19-foot parking stall length is a very standard parking stall length. Most vehicles on the road today are actually well below 18 feet from bumper to bumper. So we believe this condition of 19-foot head-to-head parking stalls is satisfactory and is safe for operation in this parking lot. The third and final item that was a carryover from the planning board hearing in 2020 is the existence of the southern curb cut, or I should say just the existence of having 2 curb cuts on Degnan Boulevard. At the original planning board meeting, it was left a little bit open-ended and for the applicant to consider the removal of the southern curb cut, given the proximity and location of that curb cut from the single-family house across the street on the east side of Degnan Boulevard. We did consider this. We went back and went over it. From an engineering standpoint, we believe that it's a safer and more efficient parking layout, especially for a parking lot of this size, to have 2 curb cuts, 2 means of access and egress. In addition to that, we reached out to the property owner of that property across the street on Degnan Boulevard and obtained a letter in favor of maintaining the curb cut there as shown. These are the three relaxations that we were looking to modify from the original planning board hearing. Just to clarify, there are one or two other items that came up that I want to just get on the record. The original planning board application granted a relaxation for the total number of parking stalls. It was a 9-stall relaxation. This was actually in error. The original parking calculation was shown in error with the wrong building square footage. The actual parking deficiency is only 7 vehicles, 7 stalls, as opposed to 9. So the actual relaxation has gotten better at this site. The last item is there was a little bit of confusion given all of the back and forth with the engineering department regarding the type of fencing that we provided around the perimeter of the site. I just want to put on the record that the applicant is going to proceed with the town of Islip standard fence item. It's Islip item 106, 107. It's a chain link fence with the stockade slats in it. That is all I have. So if there are any questions, I'd be happy to address them.
Go to Mr. Gonzalez for a staff report, then we'll come back for questions. Mr. Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This split zone property, mostly B3, almost 2 acres, currently vacant, as the applicant's team has stated. There was a CFC to demolish prior structures on the site issued in May of 2020. As stated before, PB 2020-009 on June 3rd of 2020 and July 15th of 2020 was granted buffer landscaping and parking relaxations for the proposed 25,200 square foot medical office. The site also had a ZBA grant with application number 547-20 to extend the less restrictive use into a more restrictive zone. That came to be because of the 3 different zones that were on the property. So they had to go before the ZBA for that. During site plan review, further relaxations are required based on the plan that the board saw for the PB action back in 2020. As Mr. Riley stated, in terms of buffer, the west end from 6 feet to 4.6. The southeast end near the southerly curb cut 10.1 to 9.4 feet. The decrease in buffer is minimal, and as long as the applicant can maintain any existing vegetation while still providing the same amount of buffer plantings, it should not be an issue. As they stated, the one to the west was an error in the meets and bounds. That's something that's out of our control. The parking. The proposed head-to-head stalls, which are proposed at 19 feet in length, where 20 are required. For use predicated on clientele in need of medical care, functional parking should be a priority. However, the amount of parking for such a use is also at a premium, as we all know, medical uses, especially on Long Island. It is more of a high volume use, medical, and this amount of parking on site. So, the only way to accommodate the standard 20 feet, you would essentially lose 4 feet from somewhere on the property, whether that be the buffer to the south, which is already looking to protect existing mature vegetation. Some of those evergreens are quite tall, or the building would essentially have to shrink because the sidewalk that's at the back of the building where all the ADA stalls are also had to be increased in order to provide room for vehicle overhang. It was probably increased from 5 to 6.5 feet to accommodate that. So there's a little bit of a pinch point going on for that. And as the applicant stated, the curb cuts, the prior application had discussion between the board members, the applicant and staff at the decision hearing, which the grant was subject to working with staff on potentially consolidating those 2 curb cuts into one. It was not a listed condition. However, it was requested by the chairman that the applicant work with staff based on the concern that the southerly curb cut would be directly across from the residents on the east side of Degnan Boulevard. Based on that, staff felt it best to have the board weigh in on that item, as they have, maintained the 2 curb cuts. There was a letter which I did forward to the board members from that neighbor showing no objection. So just for the record, that was sent in. That neighbor had no objections to the 2 curb cuts. So staff has prepared the attached conditions. They were sent to the applicant's team. Should the request be met with no concerns from the board, but I will open it up for any questions if there are any.
Thank you. Mr. Riley, my only question for you is, or for Ms. Gonzalez and Mr. Riley, the town standard is 20 feet. Give me a reason why, besides saying I don't agree with the town standard, why this should be an exception for this specific property. Otherwise, we're basically, by approving this, telling every applicant that 19 feet is the new standard. So speak to me regarding that.
Right, understood. I think two things I'll say to that. One, as I mentioned, it was a little bit of a balance in this situation. I think that from an engineering standpoint and from the applicant's viewpoint, we wanted to truly maintain as much of a landscape buffer along the southern property line as possible. There is senior apartments in the next property down from us to the south. And you can see, their property doesn't really have very much of a landscape buffer to their property line. Not that they're required to, but we wanted to really maximize that and have enough room to leave space for large evergreen plantings. In addition to keeping some of the evergreen plantings that are there today, the mature plantings. The second thing I'll say is that the town of Islip parking standard is 9 foot by 19 foot for normal parking stalls. It's only in this condition where it's a head-to-head parking stall that town of Islip requires it be extended to 20-foot length stalls. And I think that's kind of proof that a 9 foot wide by 19 foot long stall is an adequate length for most vehicles that are on the road today. Parking head to head, there is not a major reason why the parking stall lanes would have to be increased another foot in either direction. Looking at, we do have a list, it's not submitted, but we do have a list at my office of all the bumper to bumper lengths of the most popular cars on the road today. And like I said, probably about 85% of them are below 18 feet. It's only those, Ford F-250s, et cetera, that get up, to be 20 feet or more in length.
Riley, I hear everything you're saying. I have a couple of things on that. I mean, we're not undoing the town standard. That would be somebody else who would be doing that, namely the town board who deals with town standards. So us to step aside from that, which I don't necessarily have a problem doing. I just want to make sure we're differentiating why in this case it should be done. Not that the town standard is wrong. What makes it different? You did say one thing that caught my interest there, that is the town planning staff asking you to maintain the evergreens that are there? Or Tanner, maybe you could speak to that.
Chairman, may I speak?
Yeah, Mr. Nazaro, go right ahead.
All right, thank you. I just wanted to point out that unfortunately, there was an error on the original plan that was approved by this board. We did show the 19 feet, and unfortunately, our engineer as well as the planning staff missed it. So it was on the original application. We didn't change it since the first time you saw it. So unfortunately, losing that entire aisle would be obviously a great hardship. And we wanted to maintain the buffer as much as we could. As far as the mature plantings that's there, they are very, very large. And I'm not even sure we're going to be able to maintain those, but we will replant something substantial should that be the case. I just wanted to make that clear also. And on the third point was, I believe that the planning staff has received a letter from our tenant, Northwell Health, that they prefer the second curb cut for the functionality of the parking lot. So I just want to bring those 3 points out. Oh, I'm not hearing you.
Just trying to I understand. I'll go to the other board members. I understand what you're saying. I'm trying to differentiate this. I mean, we're not here tonight to undo the town code in terms of what's required parking stall wise. If there's a different reason why that we can differentiate this from every other project that will come before us, I think we can do that. Are there questions from other board members?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Brown.
Oh, yes. And looking at the application and visiting the site, the mature evergreens is something that I would be willing to go to the 19 feet on the parking spaces to keep those trees. And I think that makes it unique to this property, the layout that we have in order to keep those.
That's what I caught as well, and that's why I brought that up. If the town planning staff wants you to keep those there, obviously through no fault of your own, you're accommodating the town planning staff by leaving those mature evergreens in there. It certainly differentiates this from
Correct.
asking for a lot of relaxations.
If at all possible, they will remain. Yes, absolutely.
And I do believe that was a comment that was received on one of the many comment letters from either engineering or planning, was to try to maintain those existing mature evergreens to the largest extent possible.
Right. That's why I raised it. If the staff is asking you to do something, obviously we're asking you to do something which would require you to be accommodated on that in order to comply with the staff is asking for. Mr.
Right.
Nazari, you had something?
No, Mr. Chairman, just to
Mr.
finish
Brown.
my comments,
Okay.
I am not opposed to the second curb cut because of the letter that they have from the resident that it impacts most.
Yeah, my only concern would be the reason for the I'm in agreement on everything else. My only question was to get us to the 19 foot, which I think, based on Mr. Brown's comments and my comments, and Mr. Gonzalez confirms that the engineering staff has asked for them to maintain those evergreens.
From my understanding, yeah, if the, any buffer in the town that someone is required to have, if there is existing mature vegetation, first and foremost, they are supposed to preserve that if possible and supplement that in addition. So that would be, the ideal scenario. That so for this instance, yeah, we would want them to preserve the existing vegetation over there.
Anything further from the board?
And Mr. Chairman, I would just concur with Mr. Brown. It's important to preserve the mature buffer, especially when you have a senior, a fairly dense senior community to the south of this, adjacent to this parcel.
Thank you, Mr. Frugieri. Anything further from the board? Anything further from the applicant?
No, sir. Chairman, I think that's pretty much it.
So I think we're okay with all this. We're going to ask you to preserve those mature plantings there. I think that certainly differentiates. In this case, we've asked you to do something, which is why we can get past the 20 foot and get down to the 19. It's not just you coming and asking us to do something different because you don't agree with what the town code says. That may need to be changed. That's a separate issue from what we're looking at tonight. So that being said, is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to grant the application based on the testimony tonight and the fact that we're going to keep the mature evergreens as part of the application.
The motion by Mr. Brown to grant the application, subject to the testimony this evening, to maintain the current mature evergreens. Is there a second to that? Mr. Frugieri, second?
Yes, I'll second, subject to the covenants and restrictions.
And second as well as to the covenants and restrictions that have been prepared by planning staff. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The application is granted.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Have a good evening. And that was our last item on the agenda for this evening. Hopefully we'll be, well, not hopefully, we'll be back in person at the next meeting, finally. We might have been at this one, but we put the notice out ahead of time and things changed rapidly while the notice was out, so we couldn't change that. That being said, is there a motion?
I'd move to adjourn.
Motion by Mr. Moretti to adjourn, second by Mr. Mattermore. I'm not sure if that wink or that hand up by Mr. Mattermore was the second, but I'll take either one as the second. All in favor?